you look out that window and you see the way it's dumping snow on us, think about it this way. It makes it seem even better to be inside where it's nice and warm today, doesn't it? I think so. How many of you have or are currently enjoying a nice cup of coffee this morning? I see some coffees in here. Coffee is like life. So if you ever need a cup of coffee in this room, if you had to show up 2 minutes late to class, and you say, Tonkin, I was late because I was getting coffee. You know what that says to me? That's an excused late entry to class because we all need our coffee. I know I've started class late because of coffee before. Guys, we're going to be continuing Chapter 3 today about global business. Now, here's what's up. Everybody's been saying, when's our first test in here? And I'm about to tell you. Our first test in here is likely going to be next Monday. The reason I'm doing it this way, we're going to be likely finishing this chapter today or Wednesday. That way, instead of having to study during the week, you have the whole weekend to study with the study guide I'm going to provide to you. We're going to be using Lockdown Browser for this exam. And so, guys, what I'm going to be asking you to do on Wednesday, I'll be sending you a link. If you don't currently have Lockdown, to install it. If you already have it installed, we're going to be testing it out in class. So, our first test in here is going to be multiple choice, true and false, in 3 chapters. It is not something to fear. We will review. Now, here's the trick. When we get to midterm grades, which are coming up here really shortly, in the syllabus, we have several things that factor into your midterm grade. We have your homework, we have your tests, and we have your project. Because we haven't done our project yet, your midterm grade will be 50-50 between your test and your homework. If you get a less than satisfactory result on your test, do not fear. The other thing, too, on the test, there's going to be bonus questions. Guys, who here can remember? What kinds of things do I put on the test as bonus questions? Will knows. He's been in my classes before.
Oddball stuff in class.
What's the weirdest thing you remember me asking on a bonus question? I bet it has to do with the name of my dog.
Yeah.
What's my dog's name? If you remember that, you'll almost always get a bonus point. There's another sure way to get a bonus point in this class, even if you don't know the answer to the bonus question. What might that be?
If you write a joke that makes you laugh.
If I actually laugh out loud when I read your joke, I will give you a humor point. I have done it. Keep them appropriate. I've gotten some jokes that, although they were funny, I could not, in good conscience, give credit for. So just remember that. All right, guys. Last call for LinkedIn. If you didn't get a perfect score on your LinkedIn page, I've given lots of people points. Last call for LinkedIn. This is your last opportunity to up that grade. And the ethics discussion posting is now about a week late. So if you didn't do that, guys, I can give you at least partial credit if you get that in. All right, other things to consider, guys. Your next assignment is also due on the 1st. And this is easy, guys. We're talking global business. I'm asking you to tell me a product that either you own or would like to own. In 1 page or less. Less is fine. Tell me the name of the product. Tell me why you like the product. Tell me where it's currently made and where you think it should be made. An example would be, if I said a product I own, I love Converse Chucks. They're my favorite shoes to walk around in. Right now, they're made in Vietnam. I might prefer they be made someplace else that pays better wages, even though the company is unlikely to do so. Why might the company not want to move their production from Vietnam to another country? Or conversely, why does Converse and Nike like having production in places like Vietnam?
They pay less for labor.
Exactly correct. So they're unlikely to say we're going to move because of the cost of labor. So that's your next assignment. So it's a great time to get to consider a product that you like or enjoy. But you guys remember, in class on Friday, on our little virtual session, oh, by the way, a reminder about Friday classes. From here on out, although they are going to continue to be virtual, I will be in this class teaching on Friday. So if you still want to come to the class, if you don't have a quiet place to take your class, you're still welcome to come to this room. It will be online, but I will be in this room. So we made that agreement last week. We talked about the UK leaving the European Union. Guys, what are the benefits of countries being in the European Union in the first place? Why do countries enjoy benefits from being in the EU? It's very similar to the North American Free Trade Agreement, NAFTA. Why do countries benefit from being in the EU? Yes?
No tariffs.
It's a tariff-free zone, a universal currency, for example, the euro, and economic power in purchasing. Some countries want to leave the EU. Great Britain has left the EU, and the reason being they did not feel they were getting significant economic benefit from being a part of the EU. And I would like to play a brief video for you guys. Moving parts of the just heard about a 6-minute video. And I want to give you some context for how all this stuff fits together. So let's talk about it for a second. When we have the EU, the European Union, you essentially have a group of countries. Let's just name a couple of the big ones. We've got Germany, we got Italy, we got France, we got Luxembourg, and now we have the UK. So the UK has decided they don't want to be part of this collective deal anymore. Well, here's some of the things, or some of the reasons. Actually, let me ask you guys. Why did the UK pull out in the first place? Anybody have an idea why the UK decided they didn't want to be part of the European Union anymore? Because it sounds like a pretty good deal. You get no tariffs, you get shared trade policies, you don't have to negotiate on your own. Why might the UK have pulled out of this deal? Any thoughts? What might be a problem if we all, for example, came in on a deal together? What might be a reason one of us might get out of a deal? It's not complicated. What's the reason you might leave a deal that all your friends thought was a good deal? Yes. Money is exactly the reason. So we're talking about folks who are in the European Union. The larger the economy, the bigger administrative fee you pay to be part of the European Union. What I mean by administration is somebody's got to pay for the administrators, somebody's got to pay for the policymakers, somebody's got to pay for the tax collectors, somebody's got to pay for all this stuff. And as one of the largest economies in Europe, the UK was paying more than just about anybody other than probably Germany. And what the UK was saying, the citizens were basically saying, what are we getting back from this, guys? Are we getting a lot of trade in return, or would we be better off negotiating our own deal? And so the UK basically said, we are leaving, we're cutting our way out of all of this. Well, what happens now? The UK was part of this group of people who had a tariff-free zone. What does the UK have to do with all these other countries now? What do they have to do? They got to set up their own policies. Mask up, please. They got to set up their own policies and own trade deals with all these folks. So they can make a deal with Germany on one part, they can make a deal with Italy on another, a deal with France, and a deal with Luxembourg, and all of these can have different strings attached. What this essentially does is slows things down. In addition, could these countries be now putting tariffs on goods coming out of the UK? Absolutely. So all of a sudden, all the folks who are manufacturers and exporters in the UK have to contend with new trade deals for all these things. Now, the one point that came across is the fact we got this COVID-19 vaccine. And the European Union is basically saying we have to go all in on this together so that we can all have equitable distribution. The advantages to the UK on this particular aspect, they don't have to negotiate with all those folks. If they find a supplier of a COVID-19 vaccine, they can get it for themselves and inoculate their own population. That's not a bad thing. But the other parts of this are going to ultimately probably cost British consumers more in the long run. For example, can somebody think of a car brand that comes out of the UK? There's only really one major car brand left in the UK. Who is it? I'll give you a hint. It's named after a large wild cat. Jaguar. So all of a sudden, if you're making Jaguars in the UK, which, by the way, owned by a company out of India now, by the way, but if you're exporting them from the UK, you may be facing tariffs to get them into Germany, Italy, France, and Luxembourg, and all the other parts of Europe as well, and they're pricey cars to begin with. So is this going to work out in the long run? We're going to find out. I know that, for example, there are some folks who really did not like the idea of a free trade zone between the United States, Canada, and Mexico. Why? Why were some folks in this country opposed to a free trade zone in the first place? What country has the lowest minimum wage in North America? Mexico. And so if you're doing manufacturing in the United States and you're seeing your jobs go south of the border, you're not happy about it. And so folks in the EU are feeling the same way about the potential benefits or threats to their economy as well. This is something that's going to be playing out over the next year, guys. So pay attention to it. But today, we're just going to do a quick concept check, guys, the pros and cons of NAFTA. North American Free Trade Agreement, which has also recently changed names to the Canada-Mexico-U.S. Trade Agreement. I can't remember the new name. But it comes down to the idea that the pros are we can buy goods from Mexico and Canada. We as consumers benefit because we get cheaper goods and services. The cons are that labor tends to move to cheaper labor markets. And the European Union, for example, is another free trade zone. And again, they're having a lot of internal problems because the big economies in Europe are propping this up, the UK among them. All right. Boy, that was 20 minutes of solid content. I'm feeling pretty good about that. I'm feeling so good, as a matter of fact. I think it's time for our first question of the day. If somebody in this room has a question or a comment or something to say, what might it be? Who has something they want to ask or get on a soapbox about today? Anybody. Otherwise, I'm going to randomly pick somebody. Yes, sir.
Did you end up going to Knickerbocker's Tavern on Friday?
I didn't. My wife got home. She was exhausted from work, so we had pizza at home. And it was good, but we're going to the Knickerbocker tonight, hell or high water. You know why? Because it's wing night. It's wing night, and it's always the best night to go. Thank you for that question. All right, guys. So you may ask yourself, who are our biggest trading partners? Well, here they are. China, for example, owns more of our debt than anybody else, but in terms of the people who buy exports from us, we export more to Mexico and Canada than we do to China. Why? Because we're right here. Canada, check it out. We absolutely have the biggest amount of our exports going into Canada. Imports, we're importing more from China than anybody else, but Mexico is a close second. Why do we import so much from Mexico? What kind of products do we pull in from Mexico? What's a big one? Produce, agriculture, things that grow in warm climates. And if you're Senator Ted Cruz, you're doing tourism there, and the press is nailing you for it. Oh man, Senator Cruz taking his family on a vacation when Texas is freezing. Not a good political move. In terms of total trade, guys, check this out. We in the United States, in terms of our total trade, 3 trading partners represent, what do we have here, 28, 30, almost 40%, about 40% of our total trade comes from these 3 countries. And the person, or I should say the country, that buys the most from us is still our neighbors to the north, Canada. So when we start talking about keeping good relations, yes, we sell more to Canada than anybody else. It's a lot of money. If we want to get into other countries, if we want to do trade, we have what we refer to as a continuum. Now, this is not in your textbook. This is something that I added in with my own kind of take on this stuff. This is how you get into other countries if you want to trade. So when we start talking about trade, the easiest way to get in is licensing, and the hardest is counter trading. When we move on a continuum, that means we move from one extreme to the other. So we're going to be starting on the extremely easy and working to the extremely hard in terms of licensing. Licensing is simple. Guys, how many of you are fans of a major professional sports team? Oh, come on, guys. Wake up. Wake up. How many of you guys are fans of a major sports team? I know we got some hands back here. Will you tell me what's your favorite professional sports team? You own any Eagle stuff? Who else has what do you own? You have a hat? Who else has some merchandise? What merchandise do you have?
Pirate shirt.
Pirate shirts. All this stuff is licensed, guys. The Pittsburgh Pirates, we're not making them actually start selling stuff. They're putting their label on it. We're paying them for the right to do so. It's the simplest way, by the way, to get into a foreign market as well. You can license your intellectual property to somebody else. We do it with everything from Mickey Mouse to Marvel characters. It's easy. What the challenge is we also can have it being so easy that other people can do it too. My wife has a little bit of an obsession with a Pittsburgh Steeler. His name is Troy Polamalu. How many of you know Troy Polamalu? What is his most distinctive feature other than his ability to play? Yes? His hair is amazing, right? I think she's got a little thing for his hair. I'm not totally sure. But I know she owns a jersey with Troy Polamalu's number on it, but it's not a Nike jersey, and it's not a Reebok jersey. It's a Reboy jersey. Yes, she has a knockoff bootleg jersey. But if you didn't see the Reboy logo, you would swear it was legit. She got it from China for, I think, $40 when a bunch of her friends were ordering it. That's the challenge of licensing. It's easy to make bootleg copies of stuff that is licensed. Reboy. That, by the way, that would be a fantastic bonus question. Who's my wife's favorite football player? Here's some other stuff that's gotten produced over license over the years. If you are car people, what is this vehicle? It's a very iconic design. What is it? It's a Jeep, so you would think. By the way, these 7 horizontal grill slots here, they have copyrighted that. If you try to make a SUV with that grill on it, they'll sue you to the end of the earth. There was a company from India called Mahindra that made a clone of the Jeep with those kinds of grill slots, and they got sued over. What you can't see is there's a little Mitsubishi logo up on top. This was produced in Japan in the post-war era in the 1950s under license from Jeep. They made them in Japan. Here's another trivia question, guys. The Jeep, does anybody know where the Jeep was born, by the way? It's real close to here. You guys are perilously close to the place where the Jeep was born. What town in Pennsylvania did the Jeep come from? I'll give you a hint. Close to Pittsburgh. Very close to Pittsburgh. They have a big fair at this place, too. Anybody have a guess? Begins with a B. Yes.
Never mind.
No, it's okay. Anybody have a guess? Anybody from Pittsburgh? Yeah. It's a town close to Pittsburgh. Begins with a B, and they have a big fair there. Butler? It is Butler. Home of the Big Butler Fair, or as they like to say in their advertising, the Big Butler Fair. Yeah, the Big Butler Fair is amazing. Well, the Jeep was a product of the Bantam Motor Company in Butler, Pennsylvania. Now, they didn't ultimately end up producing it because they didn't have the manufacturing capability. Willys got the contract, and that's why we call them Willys Jeeps and not Bantam Jeeps. True story, look it up. Here's the other thing. In World War II, the Jeep was also produced under license by Ford. How can you tell a Ford Jeep from a traditional Jeep? Anybody know? Look it up. It's called the Ford Mule. Instead of the grill slots going horizontal or vertical, they went horizontal. Otherwise, it's identical to a Jeep made under license by Ford. So again, the Jeep, born in Butler, Pennsylvania, Bantam Motor Company. How about Transformers? Oh, I love Transformers, guys. How many of you, when you were kids, played with Transformers? What was your favorite?
Bumblebee.
Bumblebee, yeah. Who else? What was your favorite? Optimus Prime. Anybody else? True story. My brother, we were kids, had an original Ultra Magnus. Oh, it was the shit. It was absolutely the coolest toy ever. But Transformers, get this, were a total flop in Japan when they first came out. Nobody wanted anything to do with them. They exported them to the U.S. They made a cartoon for the U.S. market. They exported the cartoon back to the Japanese market, and it became a hit. So Transformers were not originally a hit in the United States or Japan until they were a hit in the United States first. It's just like when you're in an awesome band and you can't become famous in your hometown. Then we get into franchising. So let's put this into perspective. If we have easy over here, we start moving just a little bit more difficult. This is easy. This is licensing. This is franchising. Franchising is really easy too, because basically you're buying into somebody else's established system. We talk about two restaurants throughout the year. We talk about Chick-fil-A and Kent Tompkins Chicken Shack. You're going to lunch. By show of hands, how many of you are going to Chick-fil-A? How many of you going to Kent Tompkins Chicken Shack? All right. Well, I'm glad for the support, guys. I appreciate the support, but we're no Chick-fil-A. For those of you who chose Chick-fil-A, you will not hurt my feelings. Why did you pick Chick-fil-A over Kent Tompkins Chicken Shack? You know what you're getting, right? Kent Tompkins Chicken Shack, man. I don't know what I'm getting there either. I think I'd be a little afraid about eating a Kent Tompkins Chicken Shack. So yeah, you get brand recognition. You have the ability to promote because people know exactly what they're getting. If I prop up a Subway in Loretto, there's no question about what you're getting at a Subway unless whether or not it's really tuna, I guess. That was a lawsuit that's been in the news lately. But Chick-fil-A, Planet Fitness, all these are franchises. You get established recognition. Here's the challenges, however, is that when you set up a franchise, if you're in the middle of nowhere, if you're the first Chick-fil-A in a region, you have trouble getting product. You have problems getting supply. So you have to be part of the network. The first Chick-fil-A in Altoona, by the way, was built about 15 years ago, and it failed. Nobody knew what the hell it was. When the second Chick-fil-A opened, the lines have been out the door ever since. And so sometimes you don't hit on the first try either. And sometimes you got to deal with local tastes. Speaking of local tastes, this is what you would get if you went to a Pizza Hut in Japan. This is called the Mega Pizza. It's a pretty amazing caricature of American food. The crust is actually made out of pastry with hot dogs and cheese. In the crust, there's hamburgers on top of it and every other conceivable topping. We make things for the regional market. Let me give you an example, guys. If I go to Germany and I go to McDonald's, what can I get that I can't get at a McDonald's in the United States? What can I get? Yes. I might get something that's a regional flavor for sure. I can get something to drink with my meal that I can't get in the U.S. McDonald's. What might that be? I can get a beer at a McDonald's. How many of you have ever been to Hawaii? Yeah, did you go to McDonald's in Hawaii while you were there? No. Their local breakfast there has Portuguese sausage, rice, and Spam. That's their big breakfast because people in Hawaii can't get enough Spam. So when we go to regional areas, sometimes franchises have to adapt. It's amazing how they adapt. For example, if you go to a McDonald's in India, actually, let's make it even more complicated. What won't be on the menu if I go to McDonald's in Israel? Something will not be on the menu. What is it? Pork for sure. I'm not getting the McRib. There's one other thing you're not going to be able to get on your hamburger. You can't get cheese. Why is that? Because in the Jewish faith, people who practice Judaism do not believe in mixing milk and cheese. And you can get a milkshake, but they won't sell it to you with a hamburger. So those are regional tastes that we deal with. Then, again, we were talking about the continuum here. Let's go back. Licensing. The Philadelphia Eagles don't make their own sweatshirts. Franchising. We buy into the Chick-fil-A system. Now I get into what's called contract manufacturing. And that means I control my brand. I'm paying somebody else to do it. We do it all the time. Levi's, for example, I don't know, like Levi's was a big brand for my generation. How many of you guys still wear Levi's jeans? Yeah, but they're getting less of an attachment all the time because it was very much something for Gen Xers. We love them. If I have probably at home I got 12 pairs of Levi's. I have way too many pairs of jeans. Some are made in Egypt, some are made in Mexico, some are made in China. None of them, unfortunately, made in the USA, but they're made under contract in other places. Ford, for example, makes stuff under contract all over the globe, and so does Apple through the company Foxconn. The biggest advantage is cost. You can save money by going to a cheap labor market and having somebody else make it for you. Now here's where we get into the disadvantages. My normal inseam when I buy a pair of jeans is 30. 30 to 32. I can buy 2 pairs of Levi's, one made in Egypt, one made in China. One pair will be dragging on the ground, and the other will look like I'm wearing capri pants. So nobody my age should be wearing capri pants, for sure. When it comes down to it, quality and control are the issues with contract manufacturing. Oh, and then we get into joint ventures and strategic alliances. Guys, we talked about this in the last class a little bit. Let's see here. I'm going to hit on my folks out here online. I'm going to say hi to them, to fellow folks online. You guys remember I mentioned in the last class that we had 2 manufacturers of big pickup trucks. Both have the same transmission now in their trucks. Does anybody remember what the 2 manufacturers were? I think you do. There's 3 big American car manufacturers. It's 2 of them. Who is it? Boom! Well played. They both have the same transmission in their vehicles now. It was a joint venture. What a joint venture means is we're going to get together as 2 companies in possibly 2 different countries, and we are going to create something together as a short-term investment. In other words, a Ford pickup and a Chevy pickup are still different vehicles, but they share the same transmission. That was a one-time deal. And then we get into something called a strategic alliance. Again, just ever so slightly more this direction. That means it's longer term. It's a bigger commitment. Guys, check this out. Who is Apple's biggest competitor in the phone market? Samsung. Every one of your Apple phones has a Samsung component in it. So they are competitors, but they work together on some things. So Samsung, for example, has a long-term strategic alliance with Apple. Apple has a long-term strategic alliance with Samsung to use some of their components. What are some of the advantages? Well, the advantages in either of these arrangements is we get to share some of our costs. The disadvantage is we're sharing the intellectual property as well, and we also have a problem that our products start seeming less unique. If my Ford is shifting just like your Chevy, all of a sudden I'm wondering why I'm buying either brand. Why do I have loyalty to either brand? So again, these are all big issues. And then we get into one of the bigger and more complex arrangements, and that means when you are directly investing in foreign companies. We're going to go in. We're not paying a contractor. I'm going to go into China and set up a factory. As a guy from central Pennsylvania, and Believe me, how many of you are from Pennsylvania, by the way? One of these days, I'm going to teach the entire first part of the lecture in Central Pennsylvania speak, and we'll make everybody mystified. I'm going to talk to you guys, Nat, about that over there. And you guys are going to have to listen to me talk about how slippy it is out there across the creek and that. So I'm going to do a whole lecture like that. But that's where I'm from. That's where I came from. What is my challenge? What are some of my challenges if I say I want to set up a factory in China? Well, what would be challenging about setting up a factory in China? Definitely international. We don't even speak the same language, right? We have different cultures. What else might be hard about setting up a factory in China? Just actually buying the property. For example, I don't know the territory over there. If I go into China, I don't know the territory. I don't know the culture, guys. In the United States, for example, we're a very direct culture, as if you couldn't tell by the way I talk sometimes. Guys, in business in the United States, we shake hands. We look each other in the eye. We like people who are blunt. We like bottom line types of negotiation because we're all so time pressed. If we get into other cultures, different people build trust at different lengths of time. Chinese culture, by the way, has been around for thousands of years. We are a blink of an eye to a culture that has existed for thousands of years. And so somebody from China who does business is going to build trust slowly and over time. You're not going to immediately set up a factory and have people wanting to do business with you. And also, if you go into China, you have to have a local partner. If you don't have somebody local who's got a stake in your business, you're not going to be a success. Let me give you an example. I'm going to tell you guys about one of my favorite products. Can anybody guess? I talk about it all the time. It begins with a B. What's one of my favorite products? It's a four-letter word. Beer. I love beer. Beer saved the world in so many ways, and lots of marriages, too. Beer saves lots of marriages. Alcohol is the source of and solution to a lot of problems in life. There was a company out of California called, you know what I'm talking about. Stone Brewing is out of California, and they are one of the biggest leaders of the microbrewing revolution. When people started saying, you know what, Budweiser's terrible beer, we need to make better beer, Stone was one of the first companies to do it. Stone got so big, they decided they were going to open a brewery in Europe. They wanted to open a brewery in Germany because they wanted to go to the heart of brewing. I mean, if you want to know where beer really came from in the world, Germany's a pretty good place to start, although Czechoslovakia could be argued too. That brewery bled money for 3 years until they finally pulled the plug on it. Why? Because nobody in Germany wanted an American company coming in and muscling on their territory and on their tradition. So you cannot always predict how it's going to work out, and sometimes all the money in the world is not going to overcome tradition and local resistance to your product. It can be challenging. So that's how beer failed in Germany. And also, the Germans don't much care for IPAs either, believe it or not. All right, and then we get into one of the more complex areas, and we call this counter trading, guys. So all these things so far have been more or less between companies. When we get into counter trading, what this could mean is I'm in the United States, and we had a trade war with China last year. So all of a sudden, we've got all this excess supply of bacon, which is true, by the way. One of our biggest exports to China is bacon. I'm sitting on this pile of bacon over here. Sounds like heaven, right? Lots of bacon. And over here, we've got in Canada, we're sitting on this huge pile of maple syrup. Can we trade one for the other and put it into our markets? And governments can make that kind of trade happen. If we've got a shortage of maple syrup, we have an excess of bacon. We can make that swap. So that's what counter trading is all about. By the way, guys, how many of you guys love pancakes and sausage? Isn't the best part when a little bit of syrup gets on the sausage too? It's something about salty and sweet. So anybody who doesn't like chocolate-covered bacon should judge themselves when they think about what they're actually doing with their syrup and their sausage. That's a good place for a stop for a second. Sometimes, it's like Parker, sometimes you get the right line to stop on, So I'm going to pause for a second, see if anybody has a question or comment for me about anything. What would you like to ask? Sir?
When you look up to your mom, what was your biggest pet peeve?
Oh, boy, that's a good question. My biggest pet peeve, God rest my mom's soul, she was a smoker. And I hate cigarettes. I hate them so much. And my mom probably was a 2 to 3 pack a day smoker. I grew up, I didn't realize until I was out of the house how bad I probably smelled every day going to school. because everybody in my house, including my mom, smoked. Oh, I wish she hadn't smoked. I think she'd still be alive today if she hadn't been a smoker. What about you? What's your biggest pet peeve at home?
Like when I'm doing dishes or taking out the trash, and she asks me if I'm doing dishes or taking out the trash.
You've already done it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I hear you. Just wait, man, because marriage is ahead of you too, and you get to discover. And that's not a male-female thing. It's just marriage, because no matter what you do, there are days, guys. In my test, there's always a right answer, like true or false, or a multiple choice. In marriage, however, sometimes there's no right answer. And you realize whatever word is going to come out of your mouth next will be wrong no matter what. So if you can survive that with your mom, you're ready for marriage. I swear to you. I'm giving out free advice all day. Just don't take it and hold me on it. All right. Oh, this is a good bit of content here. I think this, by the way, after I get through this slide, if I get a good question from this side of the room today, if I get a good question from this side of the room, we already had one up front. I want one from the back here. I will end class after this slide. All right, guys. If we're talking about politics, we are right now in the throes of a global phenomenon, not just limited to the United States, of nationalism. And some people say it is a good word, some people say it is a bad word. I'm not saying it is either word or either context. It just is what it is. And it means if you were saying, for example, if we have an America First policy or a Germany First policy or a Japan First policy, that's nationalism. And it's in large part a pushback to globalization. People who've lost their jobs, people who have suffered economically, people who have seen what damage globalism can do. When I say both of those things, guys, I'm not telling you what you should think. I'm telling you that it's a phenomenon that we're experiencing right now. The trick of it is, it can be very hard to overcome economically without getting into trade isolationism. And then we get into cultures, guys, and the United States versus South Korea. South Korea had a much better time containing COVID-19 than we did. Even though South Korea is a large country, South Korea is a collective culture, meaning they looked at what's good for everybody, not what's good for the individual. In the United States, we're a highly individualized culture. And that's something, when we think about our role models, we think about our John Waynes, the cowboy, and all these things, we're a very proud individualistic culture. And again, I'm not saying that's right or wrong either. I'm proud to be an individual. I'm proud to be an American. But there are things that work better and less well depending on the nature of your culture. And at times, too, some of these cultural standards get lost in translation. I'm going to talk about that in the next class a little bit. When we talk about standards of living, too, guys, in the United States, we assume we're going to have a house with maybe 3 to 5 people living in it and probably 2 to 3 cars. That would be considered extremely extravagant by other cultures and limited to other cultures as well. So we've got all kinds of different cultural standards. But as a man of my word, can I get one more question? We will call this class to conclusion. Well, we're going to go. We got 2 questions. We're going to go to the back first and in the middle.
I can save my question for another.
No, go ahead.
If you could change your name, what would you change your name to?
I think I would change my name to, let's see, Totally Awesome McRadical. I would change my name to that. I hate my name. I wish my mom hadn't given me this name, but I'm stuck with it. Yes.
If you could travel anywhere in the world, where would you go?
As lame as it is and as simple as it is, I'd go to Colorado Springs in a heartbeat. My favorite place on planet Earth. It's beautiful. Have a wonderful day, guys.